everybody. Here's a high-level overview of what we'll be doing today. Obviously, the name of the plugin says it all, Modal Page. So we're going to be creating modal pages, also known as modal dialogs. Today we'll be doing this declaratively, of course, using our new plugin. What we're actually going to be doing, the use case, is converting a typical report and form combination. As you're, I'm sure, familiar, typically you see a report, click Edit or Create, and you're redirected to the form page. We're going to modify that just a bit and turn it into a modal page. We'll go through the entire process from installation of the plugin. We'll then get into how you can open the modal dialog, and then, of course, we'll explore various options associated with closing the dialog as well. What I want to do really quick is just kind of give you an idea of what we're converting. So let's take a look. I'm going to go into this Modal Page demo app. Of course, anybody who would like access to this application, if you send us an email after the webinar, we'll be happy to send it out. But let me just run it. And as you see here, typical report. This is an interactive report on the EMP table. If I click Create, we're redirected to the form page, Employee Details, where we can make changes to the data in that table. Cancel takes us back, and of course Edit takes us to the same page in an edit mode. So this is what we're going to be converting today. It all starts with installation of the plugin, and luckily this is by far the easiest part of the process. The Apex team made this incredibly easy. All you need to do is download the plugin. We just released the plugin today, so you can go to skillbuilders.com/plugins, and you'll see a listing of our plugins. Modal Pages at the top. You can download it from there. Once you download it and extract the zip file, within it you'll find a .SQL file. That's what you're going to be importing into the plugins, which you'll find in the shared components. Then you can install it, and you're done. So let's take a look at how that works. So I'm going to go into the application. We'll move over to the shared components, and I'm going to drill into plugins. We'll go to import a new plugin, and this is sort of the contents of the zip file you'll have. I'm installing this into the sample application. Oh, whoops. By the way, make sure it's going into the right app. We're going into the Modal Page demo, and we'll install that. Okay, that's it. Once you finish installing the plugin, it redirects you here to the plugin edit screen. Really nothing we need to do here. So we're done with installation. Let's go ahead then and move on. Next up, we want to take a look at how we can open the page 2, which is the edit page, using a button. Of course, the button on the screen already is the create page, so we're going to, or the create button. So we're going to take a look at modifying that to open the modal dialog. Typically, when you're working with buttons, the pages or modal pages that you'll be opening are rather static. Okay, and that's certainly the case here. We'll take a look at dynamic links a little bit later. Now, in Apex 4.1, opening or triggering really any dynamic action, including the one we just installed. In 4.1, doing this by a button got a whole lot easier. Today's demo, I'm doing in Apex 4.0 because that's what most of you are using. I want to make sure you're able to do this in that particular version. So what you do, you go into the button, you set the action to redirect to URL, and then set the URL as you see here. We put in a little JavaScript snippet, return false. And return false just basically disables the button in a sense. Additionally, we add this ID attribute, and then you have to make sure that your button template includes this particular substitution string. We'll see why here in just a moment. Once you get the button configured, you can then add the dynamic action to the page. Of course, we'll be using the plugin we just installed, and the URL will be static. get to it. So I'm going to go to Edit Page 1, and we'll move over then to Page 2. Let's run it just so we know what we're working with. This is our page. Actually, I'm sorry, I want to be on Page 1, so yes. We're going to edit this page. We're going to start with this Create button. So I'll drill into it, and I'm going to scroll down a bit. Here's where we change the action. So rather than redirect to Page 2, go ahead and go to a URL. Just JavaScript return false. Okay. Additionally, we're going to add an ID attribute here. This is ID equals create button. And we're doing this really just so that we have something to attach onto in JavaScript. So we add those two, and I'm going to go ahead and apply the change. I'm going to run the page and click Create just to show you that we're no longer going from Page 1 to Page 2. This button has been disabled. But I'm going to inspect it to show you something that went wrong. If you look at the button here, we're missing something rather important. It's the ID attribute that we added. Now, the reason we're missing it is because of a template bug. So I'm going to go into our templates, drill down on button, and scroll to the bottom where you see the various substitution strings that are available for this particular template. We see this one, button attributes, but we do not see it here in the template itself. So we'll add it, apply the change, rerun the page, and when I focus now on the Create button, we see this ID attribute, which is of course necessary for us to work with the button via JavaScript. That's what got a whole lot easier, by the way, in Apex 4.1. All that stuff with the ID that you just saw me do, all that went away. So just keep an eye out for that. All right, now our button is set up to use. I can go ahead and create a new dynamic action. Of course, it'll be advanced. We'll call this one Create Clicked, indicating that the Create button was clicked. So of course, we're listening for the event. It's the click event, and we're going to use a jQuery selector in 4.0 or 4.1 rather. You could just select button here. We're going to say jQuery selector, and we're selecting by ID, which starts with a hash, and we're looking for the Create button. So the action, of course, this is what we installed. Here's the new SkillBuilders Modal Page plugin. We'll select that for the action. We have a number of attributes here, some of which I want to focus on now. Others we'll take a look at later. We'll start with the dialog title. We want to give our dialog a title. Of course, we're opening this in a create mode, so we'll call it Create Employee. And as I said before, we're opening this particular page with a button, which is typically static. So we'll leave this on the default, but later we'll look at triggering or taking a URL from an attribute of the triggering element. But it's a static URL going to. We're going to Page 2, so I'm going to change this, and we're also going to clear the cache of Page 2. That's the clear cache portion of the URL. So that's set up just fine. I don't want to focus on this particular attribute yet. We'll come back to that one later. All right, so I'll create that. We'll run the page, and let's see if it's working. I'm going to click Create. Ooh, did you see the loading image? Let's go ahead and close the modal page. Ah, did you see the fade effect? These transition effects provide both instant user or instant feedback to the user as well as a sense of orientation within the application, both of which can be very useful. But let me go back. Let's reopen this, and let's see a couple of things that went wrong. Well, first of all, we have tabs. We have breadcrumbs. What else? We have a cancel button that doesn't really make sense in this context. We have navigation bar entries. And additionally, you may even think, this one's more personal preference or based on theme, that the colors used in the dialog aren't quite right for the application. And that brings us to the next point, which is getting the right look and feel for your modal page. The first and foremost thing you need to do is go into the page you're opening, which for us is Page 2. And you need to change the page template. Pop-up pages should use a pop-up template. So that's what we're going to change to. It immediately gets rid of the navigation bar entries and the tabs across the top. So that's great. Additionally, you want to remove any other components that no longer make sense. That includes things like the breadcrumb region and also the cancel button. Now the user can just close the modal by clicking the X. Cancel is no longer necessary. One other change you can make, in addition to just configuring the modal page itself, is adding a new jQuery UI theme. What I have here is the URL. In 4.0, I could have done this sort of automatically, made it very easy, but in 4.1, and we have to code for 4.1 going forward, the Apex team decided not to include the other UI themes built in. So now we have to use either our own copy, or we can use Google's hosted copies, and that's what I have here. The idea is that you just put in this URL for a link and the version that you would like to use, as well as the theme name, and I'll show you how that works here momentarily. So let's go ahead and configure this page. I will close this. We'll go to edit the page. I'm going to move from page 1 over to page 2. This is our modal page, and the first change I'm going to make, actually let me run the page before I actually make any changes. Here's our current page. Now let's configure it to be a modal pop-up. First thing, we're going to change the page template. So I go into the page level attributes. I'm going to change it to pop-up. I'll apply that change. The next thing, well, we can look at the difference. So there go our tabs and our navigation bar entries. It's getting kind of clean, but we still have this region here we don't need, and we also have a cancel button we don't need. So let's get rid of those. Here's the cancel button. And then the breadcrumbs region as well. Get rid of both. Okay, so let's take a look at how the page is looking now, starting to come together. So let's go back over to page 1 and see how it looks now when we open the modal. I'll run this page. We click Create. That's looking much better. Okay. The other change I want to show you is about adding your own custom theme. So I'm going to include a link I have over here. We'll go into the openers template. That's page 1. We're going to go into this template here. And I'm just going to add this to the header of the page. I'll come down a bit, a little space, paste that in there. And you can see it here. This is the portion I showed you in the slide, the actual URL. And I've wrapped it using a link. This is just the href attribute now. And this is what I've changed. I've included the UI darkness theme for jQuery UI. So this should change the look and feel of the modal dialog itself. UI darkness obviously is rather dark. So let's see how that looks now. We'll run this page. Click Create. Completely different look and feel. Starting to look really sharp. There are some other minor things you could do. For example, we're missing some spacing here from the top of this. We can make slight adjustments here and there just by configuring various style bits. In this particular case, we changed the style of the modal page itself. I'll show you how you can do that. Actually, in the interest of time, I think I'll go ahead and skip it. But I will make one fix. I did see this. Seems like another template bug, setting the background color of this incorrectly. So I'm going to close that and just make this one minor adjustment in the opener. And I'm going to add this to the header text so that it overwrites any other rules coming in. So now when we open it, that close button looks a little bit better than it did before. Okay.
Pardon me, Dan. A couple of questions in the queue.
By all means.
If we use a third-party set of themes that uses jQuery UI themes, is this okay?
Oh, absolutely. It should look really sharp and very well integrated with your application.
Great. Another question is, will this plugin only work for 4.0 and above?
That's correct. The Apex plugin architecture was introduced with Application Express 4.0, so it only works with that version and above.
Great, thanks.
You're very welcome. Okay, so we have now learned how to open modal dialogs using a button. All right, let's move on to the next bit. Now let's see how we can open with links. Links are a little bit trickier, and of course they're also more dynamic than that button. The button's always going to the same place, but each and every link in the report on the left is unique. So it's a bit more dynamic. We'll take advantage of that. But we need to do something similar to what we did to the button. We need to disable each and every one of those links. Typically, when you click an anchor in HTML, two things happen. One, the event itself, the click, propagates out through the DOM. And two, there's a default action. The browser basically wants to take you to the page defined in the link. We don't want either of those to happen. So when we say onClick return false, we cancel both of those out. Also notice that I'm adding a class. And of course, you'd want to add a more appropriate class name. But this just makes it easy to later select the anchors that you're wanting to work with. All right. Finally, once we've configured the link, like we did with the button, we can then add the dynamic action that opens up the modal page. All right. There is a note here. Use the live binding for links and refreshable regions. All right. So we are actually in one of those, right? It's an interactive report, and it could change at any point in time. Typical bindings will have issues. Live gets around them. I'll show you how that works as well. Okay, so we're going to go to edit the page, and this is an interactive report. So to get into those links, I need to go to edit the report attributes, and we'll focus on the link column. And right here we can add some link attributes. And here's what I'm adding. OnClick return false. That'll take care of the disabling. And part 2 class is edit-link. Simple enough. We'll apply that change, run the page, and if I click on the edit links now, they simply don't do anything. But what's great about them, if I inspect them, you'll see that each and every one still has this href attribute with the correct URL that we want to use to open the modal dialog. Perfect. Let's take advantage of that. We'll create a new dynamic action. This time we'll call it edit clicked. And of course, again, we're listening for the click event. We're going to use a jQuery selector, and we're going to say when anchors that have a class that's indicated by the period class of edit link are clicked, then we want to, again, show modal page. This time we're going into an edit mode, so we'll say edit employee. And we're going to flip this one around. This time the URL location is now an attribute of the triggering element. So the attribute name is, of course, the href attribute. Ignore that for now. We'll come back to it later. Create the dynamic action, run the page. Let's try to edit Smith. We click edit, and voila. All right, so far so good. Page is starting to come together. But let's look at a little issue. I'm going to change Smith just a little bit. I'll add an S to the end of Smith's name. We'll hit apply. And what happened? Well, basically, you may have noticed that as soon as I hit apply, the content of the page was hidden. And I'm doing that because I don't know what of two things will happen. Either A, we're going to come to another page where we see this success message. Or B, the a validation error message might trigger and keep us on the page where you see those. If we come back to the same page, if there is no success message, then we want to display the page. Otherwise, we should really close it. So that's what we want to configure. And we call that auto-closing. Basically, you will use auto-closing when the modal pages that you're working with are submitted for processing. Of course, that is the case here with our page. It's a form page. So that's when you'll want to take advantage of this feature of auto-closing. And the way it works, you basically want to create a closed modal page. So think of this like your login page, a page that's used for one specific purpose. So we'll create a new page, we'll call it close modal, and it'll only be used for that. The reason being, there's no other processing associated with the page. It's simply a quick close. And then we're going to make some other changes. We need our modal page, that's page 2, to then branch after processing to our new close modal page. We also need to ensure that the branch that takes us to the close modal page includes process success messages. And then finally, we can take advantage of all this inside the actual dynamic action and set it up so that it detects this success message and closes. All right, so here's our success message, and we can actually look at it right here. So notice that there's this outer div with an ID of messages and an inner div that has an ID of success message. So really it's this that I'm targeting. This tells me that all processes went through successfully and we can go ahead and close. But let's make a couple of fixes here. What I'm going to do is create a new page. Okay, so here we are. Again, what I'm doing is creating the close page. So I'm going to put that right next to our login page. We'll put it on 101. Oops, I'm sorry, 102. Our login page is 101. I'm just going to call it close modal. And we don't need anything else on this page. That's the whole point. This page doesn't do anything other than close a modal. Okay, now let's go back to our page 2. Our page 2 is our modal page. And what I want to do, if we look at this branch, it says go to page 1. I no longer want it to go to page 1, which is what made sense before it was modal. Now I want it to go to the close modal page, which is 102. You apply that change and make one last change. This time I need to go to page 1, which is the opener, and I need to modify both of our dynamic actions. Here's the auto close on element selector. So what I want to select is div with an ID of success message. So if it detects that, it'll automatically close. I'll make the change here and do the same to the next one. It's important to note this div success message. These things can change on a per theme basis in Apex, so you occasionally will have to do some massaging. Unfortunately, they're not really consistent, at least not yet. All right, so let's see if this is working now for us. I'm going to create an employee, and we'll say test. I'll click on create. And did you notice that as soon as the create page submitted and it detected success, and thus it automatically closed and just faded off? All right, pretty neat, right? But there's a problem. In other words, we're looking at a report. The report still shows us that there is no test employee. Now, if I click go, there's our new test employee. So the employee was created, but we didn't see him. Let's go ahead and fix that. To do that, we need to look at the AutoClose event. The AutoClose event is triggered automatically when the plugin auto closes, which you saw an example of. Basically, we can attach other dynamic actions onto this. We can do anything we want at that point in time, from refresh reports to even show success messages. When you do this, you have access to 2 attributes. One is the modal page ID. The use of this one is kind of advanced. Really only going to be used on pages that have lots of different modal pages. But this one is a little bit more useful. Basically, you specified a selector to auto-close the page. This particular passback is available. It is what you selected. So it starts with the $sign. That's my indicator to tell you it's a jQuery object. It's a jQuery object that's passed from the child page back to the opener. All right, so let's take a look at how we can use that. First thing I'm going to do is go to edit the page, and we're going to create another dynamic action now. We'll call this one Modal Page Auto Closed. Okay. The event is an event that's added when you install the plugin all the way down toward the bottom. You'll see auto close and manual close. We'll get to manual close later. For now, we're going to select the auto close event. And this particular event is triggered on a DOM object. That object is the document. So you can just put that in and click Next. Now the action, what's the action we want to take? Well, if it auto closes, then something in the data must have changed, right? So why don't we go ahead then and refresh the report? What are we refreshing? We're refreshing a region. Which region? Employees. Okay, so let's try this again. This time I'm going to make a change to test. We're going to rename test Bob. And kind of keep an eye on the background here. We'll hit apply changes, auto closes, and did you see the report refresh automatically as well in response to the close? Okay, so we got that feedback there. What we didn't get was the typical success message that are often associated with these kinds of processes. But there was a success message. In fact, we used it to close. So why don't we take advantage of that fact? We'll go to edit the page, and I'm going to stack another true action here. This one gets a little bit technical. I just want to show you what's possible. I'm going to go create another action. And what we'll do is fire off a little JavaScript code, and I'm going to paste in some code here. And I'll tell you what this is doing. The first part here is selecting on the DOM, the div. If you remember, we saw earlier there's a div with an ID of messages. It's the container div that's often used to put your success message in. So we're selecting that. And at first we're going to hide it. And then we're going to put in some content, and this is where you're accessing what was passed back from the child window. So this is our object that we can gain access to. Data contains various values that are passed, and here's the custom value, this modal page close object. So we'll put the content into our div, and then finally we'll slide it down with a nice transition effect here. We'll create that. And whoops, I just noticed it was firing on load. I want to turn that off. It's not necessary on load. Okay. So let's run the page. So now we're expecting two things. I'm going to change Bob back to test. And we want to see that change immediately reflected, but we also want to see a success message right about here. So let's see. We'll go to edit Bob, change him to test, apply the change, and now we have two things happening, right? The report's refreshing. We also get our feedback on the action. And this message was taken from the close modal page and basically passed back and then displayed in the parent. All right. So that's the auto close. That's what most people are going to use. But the plugin also supports manual closings of the dialog page. And you're going to use this for pages that don't submit. Now, in our particular example, our modal page is made to submit. So I don't really have a great example, but I do want to show you how this functionality works. And currently, unfortunately, it's a little technical. Well, let's see what we have here. Okay, so you have to keep in mind, what we're trying to do is close the modal page from the child window, from the page that we open. All right, so in order to do this, we actually need to go back to the parent window. So we go window.parent, and then you see this $sign here. This is the jQuery object. So we're actually getting to the jQuery object of the parent window. And again, we're going to the parent window, this time for the document object. So we're selecting the document object from the parent, and then calling this Apex Modal Page. We're accessing the close event, or the close method, rather, and then you can really pass any value in here. This particular value could be used, say, from a report, so it would be dynamic. But this is the second parameter, is how you could pass a value back to the parent page. Okay, so I don't have, again, a real good example to show you. So what I'm going to do is put in a rather fictitious one that should at least get the point across. So here's our current modal page. Remember that. What I'm going to do is go into page 2, and I'm going to go into our employee details region. And in the header, I'm going to paste in this little bit of JavaScript. Well, it's HTML combined with JavaScript. So we're putting in a header 3, and it just says, click me to pass back the emp now. All right, so we know there's a hidden EmpNo item on the page. We're going to leverage that. Here is the actual call. Remember, we're going to the parent object for jQuery, getting the parent document, and then we're making this method call for close. And here's the value I'm passing out. I'm using $B, which gets the value of an item, and we're passing in the item's name here. All right, so I'll save that, move back over to page 1, the opener. We'll run this. And now when I hit create, we have this new H3. Okay, if I click this H3, notice it closed the modal. Okay, so that part's working. All right, but we didn't see anything in response. And you might have guessed it, just like the auto close had an associated event, the manual close also has an associated event. The way it works, basically triggers automatically, but you have a different value that you can access here. Okay, so it's this data modal page close value rather than the $ and object. This time it's just a simple value because it could literally be anything that you want to pass back. All right, so I just want to show you that that does in fact work. We'll do a simple demonstration of that fact, and I'll create another dynamic action, advanced, and we'll say modal page manually closed this time. Oops, sorry, this is the custom event manual close. It triggers also on the DOM object, or the document, rather. And the action, I'm just going to do a little bit of JavaScript just to show you that it passes back. We'll alert out a message. I'm going to access this data and then the modal page close value. So we'll go ahead and create that and run it again. Now, in a create mode, if I click this, we see the alert, and of course we see nothing because there was nothing. But if I go to edit this EmpNo 61, if I click pass back the EmpNo, we see 61. And if I edit 7369, pass back the EmpNo, 7369. So you are able to pass values back in both cases on auto and manual closing.
Pardon, Dan, question in the queue. Is it possible to pass back multiple values?
Well, because you can pass back really anything, the value could be an object, so you could pass back a JSON object, and in which case you could really pass back anything you like. In the case of the auto close, it's closing on a selector, basically selecting the success message normally. So if you want to embed any information in the success message and then parse that out, you can do that as well.
Thank you.
Okay, you're very welcome. That is pretty much the plugin. What I wanted to show you was a different use, just another use case. We'll go over to the sample application in this workspace, which I've modified just a bit. I want to show you another implementation. So here we have the home page of the sample application. I'm going to click on feedback, and notice what I've done is I've made feedback a modal dialog rather than the standard pop-up that it would normally be. I took a little tweaking to do this. I'll walk you through some of those steps. But notice here it says run page 1. I can close this. I can go to any other page, look at products, even drill down on a product. That wasn't a good idea. We'll stick on the products page, click on feedback, and notice that it changes for products. So it's centralized but modal feedback. Obviously the first step was to go ahead then and install the plugin. So that was required here as well. And what I then did, I went into the navigation bar entries. This is where you'll find that feedback entry. And if I scroll down, I'll show you what was originally in the URL target. This is what was originally there, this pop-up URL. Okay, so this is how feedback works. And I said, this is a static URL. So I made a note of that. And I changed the target to just do what we typically do, return false, which of course disables that particular link. So that's all we had to do, the navigation bar entry. Now, the trick of getting the plugin to work on any page, because this feedback link is available anywhere, was to add our dynamic action to page 0. So of course, anything added to page 0 is added to every page. So here's our dynamic action, feedback clicked. I'll drill into that. And this is a little tricky. I'm listening for the click event, and this jQuery selector may be confusing to some that are not very familiar and comfortable with jQuery. But what I've done, I've selected a div that has a class of navbar-entry. And then I filtered that using EQ. Basically, that first part of the selector here could select multiple entries, because there are, in fact, multiple entries. This filters that result set down to a single entry, and if you can imagine it being a zero-based array, when we say 1, what we're actually getting is the second element in the array. So let me just show you why I had to do that. If I run this page, and we look up here with these other navbar entries, you see that there are, in fact, 1, 2, 3. And if I hover over this one, and you look in the upper right-hand corner, you see feedback highlighted, right? So it's the second one that I wanted. This is the first, print. This is the second, feedback. So that's why I wrote that selector the way that I did. So feedback is clicked. This is, again, the selector, and the action, of course, we open the modal page. And all I did is I took that URL that was defined by default before in the actual feedback navigation bar entry, and I just pasted it in here. Of course, I made a couple of changes to the actual modal page itself. You know, just tiny things. It didn't need a whole lot. As I said before, some of these things will, slight adjustments need to be made on a per theme basis in Apex. This particular theme had a different success message identifier. So I went in, found where that was. In fact, let me show you that. When you have a modal page like feedback, and you look in the pop-up or page level template, which is pop-up, you scroll down past the 3 main parts, your header, body, and footer. Go just past that, and you'll finally get to the success message. This is where you're looking for identifiers, what makes your theme different than another. And to be completely honest, sometimes these are a little buggy in the pop-up template, so make sure you pay attention to that. So this is why I selected a div with a class of T1 success. Go back to page 0, open this up one last time. So that's just T1 success, and then of course it'll auto-close when it finds that particular element. So that's it. Of course, the one thing I didn't do that I could have done is, in response to the auto-close, I could have said feedback submitted or something like that, but you get the basic idea. We just type in test here, click submit, and off it goes when it's done. Okay.
Question in the queue, Dan, pardon me. Have you implemented the modal page with the SkillBuilders calendar link and day click events?
Yes, in fact, I have. So the question, let me see what's the best way to get there. I'll just show you the plugins page we have. That's skillbuilders.com/plugins. And that opens this. So we have, I'm going to go roundabout way. We'll come in with Super LOV demo. I'm going to go back a step. We'll drill into the calendar. So this calendar here also has, these links. When I click them, we get a modal dialog that opens up and allows us to edit the details. In fact, it's a modal within a modal. So yes, that is what was used here.
Looks great. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Folks, before we get to questions, I just want to go ahead and mention we have some Apex training coming up. Both our intro and advanced classes are running in October 10th for the intro class. Our advanced class starts on October 17th. I'm going to cover a lot of good stuff in those classes. Also, just a reminder, in addition to our normal training, we do offer other services, Apex and Oracle related, from micro to long-term on-site consulting, and also just full lifecycle application development. If you just want to offload that to another organization, we'd be happy to do that for you. Contact information is also up on the screen.